Good morning. Good morning. Good
Grand
morning.
Rising, Grand
Yes.
Thursday Rising, everyone.
Thursday rising. You bet.
Hope you're feeling good.
Yeah.
Jeff, how are you today?
I'm all right. I'm a little pillow pressed head, but I'm all right.
Yeah,
So,
well, we're going to jump right in. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thanks so much for joining us, Grand Rising. Hope you're feeling good. We're going to jump right in and start talking about Milton, right? All the
oh yeah,
devastation
that storm is
on West.
horrible. I mean, these people, I haven't heard from my brother yet. He's down in a little bit south of Tampa, and he was in a trailer too. He was more inland, but I mean, according to the chart, he's going to survive. But we told him to get out of there, and he's like, "Nah, I'm not leaving." I'm like, "Okay, you know, what are you going to do?" So yeah, I mean, this storm is horrible. It's even people that I've talked to over on the east side of the state, as we have relatives over there, and they're picking debris out of the pool and trees all screwed up. It's really bad. And anybody on the west side of Florida and central Florida is really, I mean, there's literally utility poles knocked over, roofs torn off, cars flipped up upside down. Some of the streets are, waist deep in water, so they really got hit. There's no question about that.
Well,
So,
everyone was expecting that. We just hope there won't be any casualties. I mean,
oh, there will be. There's going to be plenty of casualties. There's no way everybody survived that. Not a chance.
mm,
So let's
mm,
hope most did, but I would think there's going to be significant casualties. There's no doubt.
yeah, yeah. So, what about the energies this morning and throughout the day, Jeff?
Well, this morning, we got a moon opposition Mars. That's going to go on right up until probably, I think, around three something today. Yeah, that gets done at right around 3:22 p.m. Pacific time. If you're on the East Coast, it's going to be a lot later. It's going to be 6:22 p.m. But it's a really abrasive energy. This happens once a month. It's the opposition to Mars, but you can feel it. If you get in touch with lunar aspects, there's no question you can feel it. I watch people, we're like schools of fish, and everyone responds a bit differently, but you can really see the energy of moon opposition Mars. It's abrasive. The good news is it gets done by 3:22 if you're on the Pacific coast, or just before 6:30, 6:22 p.m. on the East Coast. And then it goes to a sextile of Venus. So,
All
again,
right.
the moon is one of the most I mean, I think if you watch the moon, it is like the ever and flower of energy throughout the months. It's very,
Yeah,
very powerful.
it's all, whenever you look at a chart, whenever you look at a question, you always say, first and foremost, got to look at the all important moon. What is the moon doing, first and foremost?
Yeah, it literally is the translator, or you could say modulator of energy in any interrogation or in any electional astrology. I have found invariably, if the moon is doing ill aspects at the time you concretize an event, meaning sign a contract or whatever, it usually doesn't go too good. And it's not the be all end all, because you can have other signifactors really screwing things up, but it really has a huge effect on energies that are put in play. Like I can't tell you how many people I've done marriage elections for, and they'll say to me, "What happened to my previous marriage?" And I'm like, "Well, when did you get married?" And I'll look, and if I see the moon doing something nasty, or more importantly, the signifactors, meaning whatever planets ruling the eastern western horizon, it usually goes south right about the time the hard aspects happen. And I see the other ones where it's good and it lasts a long time and maybe forever. So very interesting how that stuff plays out. It's almost like a timestamp that you put on it. They literally say angels are formed, the whole angelic realm has an energetic print anytime you do something that's very important. So, and you literally will find those energies play out over years. So it's very, very interesting energies.
Yeah, yeah. Very, very interesting. Someone's speaking here about the fire that is going on in Wyoming and
Oh yeah,
how,
it's horrible.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So the news though chooses to focus, obviously. Hurricane Milton is a huge deal and devastating and all that. But this person's pointing out that why aren't we hearing about this horrible fire that's going on in Wyoming? I honestly, I hadn't heard of it. You have. I haven't watched television since 2020. I
You might be lucky.
I have not watched television. Well, I've got you and a couple other people in my life who let me know what's going on, but I had
And
to
social media
detach
too.
myself from that. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I have to say, RFK just had a podcast on that I was watching this morning on X, really good about weather modification and weather direction. And he had some professionals on there speaking. And these aren't just people, say, well, I saw a chemtrail. No, these are people who are literally scientists who have got photographs and they're showing all this weather modification and the hundreds and hundreds of millions of tons of aluminum, barium, and many other products that are put into the air to literally influence. And I think the most significant thing is RFK was playing a clip of Lyndon B. Johnson 60 years ago, who literally he was saying to this group, he who controls the weather will control the world. And I thought, wow, wow, that's a little telling, isn't it?
Wow. It certainly is. It certainly is.
Yeah.
Uh,
Nothing to worry about, folks. Just your fine leaders taking care of you.
oh yeah, taking such good care of us, right? Pretty intense. We've got this election coming up. If it comes up, we were going to look at that at some point to see if the election's going to be delayed or if it is actually going to happen on the 5th or,
Yeah.
what's going on with that. But it's just, I can't believe we're at this point, or everything feels so strange to me right now.
It's
It
so
just feels
manipulated. It
so
really
off.
is. It is. And I have to tell you, the propaganda machines are so powerful. I always said this from 2020 forward, everybody was worried about the Mayan calendar. And I always said, I remember George Norrie had me on years ago. And, Jeff, what do you think of the Mayan calendar? And everybody was Mayan calendar, Mayan calendar. And I said, it's 220 forward. And when you look at COVID and what that did with that election, and now you look at these storms and all these disasters that are miraculously, popping up. And I will say though, we have had some intense sunstorms. The solar flares are off the charts. I've been really feeling that, and we have had some really powerful X-class solar flares that are huge and it has been messing with communications and weather. So, but I also say that some of this stuff that people are espousing as conspiracy theories, there seems to be some evidence that it's not. And I've gotten the same thing when people have asked interrogations. It's like, no, there's some truth to this. So clearly, the HARP in Alaska is an ionosphere heater, and they can actually direct and heat in different locations of the globe. And they actually say they can heat it up so much they can actually catch the they can actually burn it or catch it on fire, which is really stunning. And that stuff's been around for, I think HARP was built close to 40 or 50 years ago. Might have been longer than that when they actually started it. This goes all the way back to the Cirrus Project, which was way back in the 40s. So very, really interesting times that we live in.
So interesting. I mean, I might choose another word. I don't know. I'm kind of done with interesting. It doesn't,
Yeah.
it feels very different from interesting.
Fish in a barrel comes to mind.
A heart, which is beyond horrible.
They own the barrel and they own the water. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, they own it all. They own it
Yeah.
all. Good
They
morning,
own this
everyone.
place.
Thanks for joining us. Tucker, good morning.
Yeah, I think it
Tucker,
was George Carlin that said, he said, the table's tilted, folks. The game is rigged, and there's a lot more truth to that than we know. And
yeah.
it's really
Oh God,
saddening.
yeah. Yeah, it really is. We're just trying to live our lives, We're just trying to live our God-given lives. Let's jump to a question here, Jeff. Tucker is asking if either one of us has ever read a book called Antiquity Unveiled. Have you read that by Jonathan Roberts in 1884? It's very similar to Dr. Carlin and Dolores Cannon, Amazing Revelations about the Bible. Have you read that?
Yeah, I have. I've got a lot of that stuff. It's really good. And also, I forget the other one I have is, yeah, it's all these breakdowns of the Bible, and also some of them refute some of the way the story was told or the interpretations were done. Yeah. Yep. Interesting stuff.
Yeah, yeah, very, very. There's so much information out here. We just have to know what to tap into truly for spiritual growth, right? Because that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. I feel like that's what we're doing here. What do you usually say? Uh, well, we can go into karma. That's a long show, but it's
Yeah.
really about going through these experiences. And I feel like a lot of the experiences we're having them with souls that we've known before, right? We've had interactions with before. Now's our chance to really purify. This is what you say, purify and rectify. And I feel that. I really do.
Yeah, there's so much, divine and demonic energy going on this planet. And when you look at this is nothing new. This has been going on for a long, long time. And, there's belief that we go through these 25,900 or 700 year cycles, just sort of 26,000 years. And we've been in a dark cycle for a long time. Many guesstimate that it's somewhere around 3000 BC, we started heading down into a very subdued consciousness. And this is where evil and good really play itself out. And we are on an ascensional path back up. And I don't think it's going to be, next week. I think it's going to be a couple hundred years from now. We might actually enter into the sign of Aquarius. Now, a lot of people will dispute that, but from the best calculations I've seen, it's about 200 and something years from now. And I think it parallels very closely to when the Hebrew calendar runs out, when it hits 6,000, which anybody can look up on the internet. That might be somewhat close to what I've seen. We actually hit Aquarius. And even then, you're going to find good and evil still plays itself out. The interesting thing is, we talked a couple of podcasts ago about the Book of Abramelin, which is really the ancient story of the Passover to the fall equinox, measuring the 6 new moons between the Passover in the spring, by the spring equinox, to the fall equinox. And that was the ancient ritual. If you purified the soul, you would literally have a guardian angel or an angel appear to you to teach you how to control the evil spirits. And very interesting documents. That thing caused a firestorm in the 1800s when Mathers, the Secret Order of the Golden Dawn, one of the founders, had translated this document from the French. It was the Library of the Arsenals, what it's called. I was actually over in France and saw it. It's amazing, absolutely stunning. And I wasn't able to go in, but I was able to go out and see where it was and all that. And uh, the translation wasn't correct. And the one that I mentioned, the Book of Abramelin, which is a newer translation of the older Hebrew, which is stunning, absolutely stunning. You can't make this stuff up. It's all about why would the world be such a lie? Why is there so much manipulation? And the game is to get this right here, to get our mind, to get our consciousness. And when you look at the drugs and you look at the violence and you look at the propaganda machines, and Hollywood is a gigantic propaganda machine, and it really is. You look at the movies. There's been a lot of good movies put out, but there's always these agendas that have the money flow, put in certain elements that are mind bending, and this is the game. The game is our consciousness. It really is, and that is the one sovereign place that, if we're aware of it, that we can maintain and stay centered on, and that's the real game right there, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. I remember when I was very young, my sister was talking to me about subliminal messages. And back in the day, we were looking at magazines, we were reading magazines, and she would point out all the subliminal drawings that were behind an ad. Let's say it was be an ad for Coca-Cola. She would point out, we would see skulls and we would see demon forms and all this stuff. And you
Oh
can
yeah.
still see it today. It's pretty wild. I mean,
Oh, it's
unbelievable.
much more today. And it, I was just listening to a podcast this morning. Actually, it was on a news broadcast where the parents are discovering their children are coming home and saying, "Mommy, I got this little sleeping patch." They're actually giving sleeping patches to all the children. And then the parents were saying, "Well, they're not eating their lunches and they're all kind of drugged out and feeling weird." It's scary. It's scary. And of course, we hear the same thing. Look at Diddy and look at Epstein and all this stuff. And even I'll get heat for this one, but many of the Playboy girls had published in articles that they were drugged, spiking drinks, getting, drugged. And we've heard the same thing with all the politicians. This world, you got to really be centered in this world, man, because it is an onslaught of demonic forces. But I always got to say, there's also divinity. Creation wouldn't be happening if divinity wasn't stronger. And that's where we got to really stay centered, really stay centered and keep grounded because there's so many forces coming at us from so many different directions. And it's all about your mind. It's all about getting you to, have your mind controlled. It's literally mind control. There's no question about it.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. It really is. Good morning, Rocky Stucci Jr., always bringing the gold. He's asking this morning, Jeff, using a transit chart, when could one see fated karmic events to play out in one's life? What transiting aspects do these karmic fated events take form in?
Oh my God. Yeah, that's really what all astrology is about. I always say God created time so everything wouldn't happen at once. And one of the most important karmic releasers is Saturn. You always look to where Saturn is. See, all of us are going to have Saturn go around the chart about every 28 and a half to 29 years. Vedic astrologers round it to 30, but it's actually about 28 and a half, 29 years approximately. So what's so important about this is that sorry, my camera timed out here. We're having problems with cameras here, but it'll come back on any second. Anyways, they talk about the cycles. The big ones in Vedic astrology is something called sadhisate. Sadhisate is the 7.5 year period where Saturn transits the sign before the moon, the sign over the moon, and the sign after the moon. Now, in Vedic astrology, the moon is called our perception of emotional reality. And that's why AI and all this high-tech stuff is never going to be like us. We take logic and reason, and then we emotionalize it. And no matter how you process it, this is why the psychics, the astrologers, the psychiatrists, and the psychologists are never going to be out of business because everybody's always looking for answers and truth. And what's interesting is when you look at astrology and you look at transits and progressions as well, like I just did a reading for an individual who was in a really abusive relationship and like really abusive. And there was a progression going on with Mars conjuncting Pluto, and it perfects this spring. And the question was put to me, do you think I should leave? And I said, well, you're in a place right now where if you don't, violence and, intensity is like to really increase. And, there again, this is the analogy of driving a car. If you become really acutely aware of all the energies coming at you, can you avoid it? The answer is yes. Or you can certainly alter it. The most powerful thing in the universe is our reaction and our ability to assess information. This is what any good military person will tell you. The more information you can get about your situation coming at you, the more you're likely to react in a better way. And that's the key right there. And, I hope that what I told this individual will help her because very violent. And I've seen this repeatedly, even in my own life, where I've gone back and looked at certain situations that have happened. We all have these things, and we all got our stories, right? And life is a series of stories when you think about it. And it's stunning. And that is the very thing that got me to go from a skeptic to, wow, there's something really going on here. And, depending on the type of astrology you look at, there's modern astrology, which is all sun sign based, or a lot of it is. And then you have the traditional classical astrology. Now, that's the stuff that came up out of Egypt and Greece, Mesopotamia and Chaldea and all that into the more, you could say, medieval times, which was the kings and the queens. And that got really lost right after the late 1600s. Once the Industrial Revolution, or the quote unquote age of science and reason, kicked in, that's when astrology really went under the table. And the only ones who knew the real stuff was the ones running this place, the bankers and the people at the tops of the pyramid and some of the very elite politicians. And what's interesting is it's coming back now. I've seen this basically since the mid 80s to late 90s, I'd say mid 80s to late 80s, early 90s. There's been a real resurgence in that. And then that type of astrology is amazing because you can look at various things called progressions, primary directions. Literally, the Earth is a time machine. When we're born, each rotation of the Earth is literal, or each daily cycle, if you will, is literally a year in your birth chart. And the computers today have the amazing capability of calculating in extreme accuracy when these progressions and transits happen. Like I've said, I've had parents, I've had people in relationships where they had very challenging things that we could see right when these energies were perfecting. Well, that knowledge allows you to react differently, and that's a key point there. So to answer his question, transits, progressions, and directions are absolutely powerful in determining these karmic energies that are releasing upon us. And you could call them lessons too, because the lesson is to perfect how we react to things. That's the key. And then the other one is, of course, the Vedic and the Nadi astrology, which is absolutely profound as well. I mean, you can see cycles that are in what we call yogas that are forming within the birth chart, and everyone's going to react differently. There's no two people alike. Even though sun sign astrology will tell you, well, I'm a Pisces, I'm an Aries, I'm a Gemini. No, you're not. You're a soul having a physical experience. And the uniqueness in your chart, when you start looking at all the fixed stars and the yogas and the lunar mansions and the doshas, which are time lords you're in, there's nobody in the same place. Nobody. And everyone will react uniquely different because we're a soul having a physical experience. And the astrology is not predicting the future. It's just energy. So, it's still incumbent upon us to be focused and consciously aware to the reactions of the energies that are coming at us. And some people are in some really challenging situations physically, in their relationships, in their world, their environments, their jobs, and they're locked in. They got the padded handcuffs on. And, we're all looking for, answers to cope with the virtual insanity that sometimes life throws at us.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's very powerful.
Yeah. These experiences truly do feel like lessons, though, don't they? You really let yourself see what you're in, the challenge that you're going through, the situation that you're in, even at good situations. They
That's
feel
right.
like lessons.
They are. They truly are. This gets into the whole thing the religions and the Vedantic stuff got into, and that is in the Far East in India, they call it remedial measures. Remedial measures are prayers, mantras, gemstones, various different things that you can do. And of course, in the West, we call it tithing, right? Prayers and all this type of stuff. Does it have an effect? My opinion is you bet it does. There are certain karmic releasement prayers that I have that I give to clients. And I find, again, we emit thought form elementals out of the third eye chakra. See, that's where the Jupiter chakra is, right there. We see with these, but we look and we project with, in an etheric sense, with the third eye chakra. And our intentions and our thoughts that we hold permeate the auric field, and that doesn't stick with us just in this lifetime. We drag that stuff with us like a karmic gunny sack. And that's what I think we're seeing, particularly in the Vedic and the Nadi astrology, where literally you can see these yogas and there's no two exactly alike. I mean, literally the degrees and minutes that every planet's in, it's like a matrix. Again, it's truly a karmic soul matrix here. And the game is to keep us pulled down and keep us in it, keep us reincarnating. The demonic spirits really, they literally feed off of the fear and the anger and the hatred. They love it. And that's why they're demonic. And it's very hard sometimes to live life with the challenges we get. I mean, we all get really angry at some of the injustices that, happen throughout life. And what's interesting is how accurately these progressions and transits and dashas show when these karmas are releasing. And a lot of times it's stuff boomeranging back in from a previous soul root incarnated connection. So it's pretty wild.
So what that's showing us is that we haven't learned the lesson yet. If we keep experiencing something over and over.
Yeah, that could be it. And also, too, they say there are things tied to our soul roots. And this is a very mysterious thing that nobody is ever going to fully figure out. And that is that for some reason, they say the angel ties us into the body at first breath with that karmic journey. And sometimes certain souls I see have maybe even agreed to allow very challenging situations to happen for reflection for all souls involved. In
Mm.
other words, some people might actually be taking certain things, not to bring in the victim issue, but they literally might be facilitating or enabling a situation for a better conscious expansion. I see this a lot in families where you get the parents who have total dominance and control over the children, or a relationship where a spouse has complete dominance and just does some horrible things, and the person's locked in because of the finances and the life situation. And I think we can all relate to that in one way or another. And a lot of times that stuff is creating karmas as well. The actions of free will are very much at play in the astrological, you could say,
Yeah.
time. Again, it's all time. Everything is time.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes people get stuck in a situation, unfortunately, and it's really challenging to move on from there, even though you want to, right? Your free will says, I want to leave this situation, but they're stuck for one reason or another. Very, very challenging, some of it. We've got
Yeah.
Tucker here again asking a question about the book of Abramelin. He's asking about how to become independent of the electromagnetic starlight influences of the stars after purification. What would you be without the direction of the stars? I love that. I love that question,
Yeah,
Tom.
that's a great question. And in fact, that is exactly what the book of Abramelon's all about. And that is, see, this is what all the saints and the prophets and the religions actually said. And this is why religions hated astrology, is because they saw how accurate it was. And it's interesting how the Pope takes a bath in a bathtub surrounded by the zodiac. You talk about esoteric knowledge, look at Rome, the mind control center of religion. And not that a lot of great truths haven't come out of the religions, because they're all founded on great truths. But what's interesting is that the Book of Abramelin, and the same thing exists in many of the ancient practices in the Tibetan Lamas. The Greeks had it, the Egyptians had it, and that is, if the human psyche gets away from all the white noise and the egoic interaction. In fact, you'll read in the Book of Abramelin, he literally says, forget the ways of humans, or the ways of man is what he actually says, because it's forever a lie, because it's always about money and power and grabbing and, and ego and sex and all this stuff. So it'll keep you pulled into this whole spin cycle of karmic interaction. So why did they all go out into, you hear the same thing in Christianity, Jesus went out in the desert for 40 days, or Moses went on the mountain, or the yogi went on the hill, or the Tibetan Lama was, in isolation in the cave or wherever they were. You hear these stories all the time. The Hunas in India, in Hawaii too, were amazing. Read The Secret Science of Miracles sometimes by Max Freedom Long. Absolutely amazing. And what they say is once the human psyche, see, we got to realize the conscious mind is like a sponge. It picks up whatever it's around. We are so mind controllable if we're not aware of it. That's the thing. That's the literally the consciousness. This is why they're always after the children, the colleges and the schools. Hammer them, hammer them, hammer them with all the indoctrination, you see. And you look back at most dictatorships and despotic countries that had done things throughout history, they always focus on the children, right? Raise them up, get that conscious mind to be shaped. Well, that's the real principle here that was espoused in Abramelin, and that is, and it's the truth, and that is if we stay in isolation and we stay in sacred thoughts and we stay close to nature and creation. Look at Anastasia. Anastasia, not the one in Disney either. I'm talking about the one in Russia, the singing cedars, I'm sorry, the ringing cedars of Russia, where her family, for thousands of years, all the way back to Egypt, have lived in the wilderness. They live with the animals, they sleep with the animals, they live off the land, and amazing psychic powers. And they actually say that that's when the angelic forces can actually get to us. And there's an old Greek term, it's called amphitherean. They say you people are, the angels have said that we are so full of what we think we know. And we have so many concretized thought patterns and habits and beliefs that the angelic forces can't even get to us. We're just inladen with our own belief systems. Not that some of them don't have value, and not that we shouldn't learn skill sets, etc. But it's really interesting the psychology behind purifying the conscious mind and becoming aware that we get mind controlled by virtue of literally society's habit patterns. And this has actually been talked about a lot in Dr. Carl Wickland's work, Edith Fiore and Fry's work, where many disincarnate souls have come back through channels and said this stuff. Said, geez, my religion told me this, and it was nothing like that when I escaped life and went into the afterworlds. And there's a lot of texts that talk about this. And Abramelin's book is all about, he actually advocates 18 lunations, which, if you do the math, is 12 months of pre-purification. And then the final 6 from the spring equinox to the fall equinox is a total purification of the soul. It's very hard to do this stuff because he really is right. You need to get out of society and you get into the vibration of just creation in the universe. The soul and the psyche really starts to open up. And you think about how many times throughout our days and our months we get irritated by people doing stuff to us or putting stuff on us. It's ego wars, I always say the earth is a big wash machine. It's stuck on spin cycle. And it really is. And until we realize it and we pop out,
Yeah. Well, it is very difficult to get out of society. I think that's one of the reasons Krishnamurti always said, be in this world, but not of it. So we have the power to be in society, be in this world, this insane asylum, and not at the same time. I want to jump to something, Jeff. Song Sparrow, so sorry to hear about the loss of your husband. She's asking Jeff, how do I reconcile the loss of my husband, his passing? I know you've spoken to this with many people.
Well, I mean, what do you say to that? That's a tough thing. I mean, I don't care if you're losing a spouse, a loved one, whoever it is, or an animal too. I mean, it's tough. I mean, it's really tough. In some ways, they say the funerals are for the living, and there's a lot of truth to that. I just had a dear friend and client lose a little baby who was just months old, 10 months old. And, it's really tough when you lose somebody. It's like time stops. It's like your whole world shatters. And again, this is, our reality structures are very shaped by all the environments and the people we're with. I mean, the thing, there's actually prayers that you can actually say that helps the deceased, or what we would call someone deceased or dead, to move on. You can actually have prayers like that that are really powerful. And I always like to do that when somebody passes on. Wish them well, wish them consciousness and moving on to a higher place, because it's always tough. I mean, what do you say to that other than, you got to push through it and move on. And it's very life altering when you lose somebody. It's really not easy at all.
Oh,
You know,
it's beyond not easy. It's
yeah,
beyond, it's just brutal. It's
it's
just
brutal.
your
Yeah,
whole life. It everything just comes down on you. It's the missing is one of the most difficult emotions that I've ever gone through personally. It's the missing. It's the yeah.
yeah.
It's really terrible, difficult thing. But I
Yeah, I
know
get I get asked that a lot,
yes.
when does it show my charts, likely to say I'm going to exit the physical plane. And it was interesting because I'd spoken to this father uh when the child was born. We actually did a Vedic astrology reading, and he reminded me, he said, you told me this child really had a karmic thing that was being dissipated out um, when he was born. And of course, he died 10 months later. And the autopsy just came back and showed that it was some kind of a severe, like pneumonia or COVID type thing. And what do you do with that? It's so hard when you lose somebody. And it's like time stops. But again, that it showed in the Vedic astrology that the little boy was born in a Ketu dosha. And I was actually amazed that, the yogas showed up right when he exited the body. I think the only thing I can say to death is that we don't die. And that's probably the biggest, I think, misinformation, if you ever want to have one, that's out there. Nobody dies. The psyche, the spirit, and the soul moves on. And if you do the research, there's so much evidence of that. The big buzzwords today are NDE, OBEs, out of body experience, near death experience, where many people have gotten in car accidents or had surgeries and they died and they saw themselves above their bodies, or they had some type of out of body experience and then came back to tell about it. Well, when you exit the body known as death, you're not coming back in this body. That vessel's done. It's over with. And, it's interesting. You were with me, Ella, when my dog died, Shelby. And I said a prayer for her. I said, please let her move on. She was such a great soul. And you saw her, she's running around. I could actually feel her soft hair up against my face as she went around me. I could actually physically feel that, even though she was on the astral plane. And I've seen this with disincarnate souls, meaning people who pass on, they'll come back. I've had one individual. He died in a very sad way, and his sons are really good friends of mine and clients, and we do a lot of things with astrology and gems. And every time I'm with them, they were just out here from the East Coast, and I feel their father coming through wanting to give messages to them that he's so sorry that, things went the way they went, and that he wants them to realize that it was hardest on them. The living goes through the most when people pass away. We really do, because we miss them. And rightly so. It's really tough when you lose somebody. You got all these memories and all these, attachments to what happened. But, I think the living needs to realize that nobody does die, that the consciousness moves on. And I think people that exit the body, meaning death, who don't realize that we're not going to die. This consciousness is not localized to the body. It's attached to it, but it's actually not localized. That's why OBE can happen, or NDEs, or astral travel, all these things. And we've been so educated away from that. They want us down here in the sewer, worrying about the bills and the money and the rent and the mortgage payments, whatever it is. It's we're really taxed here with the physical world, and it's a very real place. And we got to pay attention to the physical world. Try driving your car and letting go of the wheel for a minute. You're not going to have a good time. So we're all burdened with our reality systems, and
Oh, the
it's
mundane day to day that we're
yeah,
trapped in. The mundane day to day. Yes,
that's
Song Sparrow is asking, does he know I miss him? And uh, I know he does.
Oh yeah.
I
I
know he
mean,
does.
what's interesting is there's all kinds of theories about this, but one thing that seems to be fairly ubiquitous is the first several weeks, and usually the first 7 to maybe a month, 7 days to a month, they say we're really in the dense lower astral planes, right next to the Earth. And there's many. A great book on this is go read the Minot Yehuda. It's a book here. I'll put it on the screen so people can actually see it. My camera might time out again. I mean, I had to use a different camera today. But Minot Yehuda is an amazing book. I'll find it first before I go and put it on the screen. But it's really a cool book. There's 88 pages. I'm sorry, no, there's 200 pages in chapter 88. I said it backwards here. Let me share the screen. I'll put this on the screen here. Yeah, this is it. What an incredible book. Because in chapter 88, 200 pages long of depossessions, what he's got in his hand there is actually not the Bible. It's purifications and rectifications on the soul. We could talk for hours and hours and hours. There's so many texts with mantras and prayers and fasting techniques that allow the consciousness to be, you could say, compartmentalized so we get more in touch with the upper portions of ourself. Well, that's where we go when we exit the body. And he talks about many different astral dimensional planes and also the angels that guide souls. Many souls, when they die, they don't even know they're dead. In fact, read Carl Wickland's book, 30 Years Among the Dead, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Most of them didn't even know that they were deceased and they were possessing other people. See, they get attracted to the magnetic auras. So what's fascinating about this book is how he explains souls finally escape out of the reincarnational processes. And of course, this is a big deal that we also hear about in the Vedantic, the Tibetan lamas, etc. Get into this a lot, where there are certain prayers and rituals. Of course, there's on the river Ganges in India, where they burn the bodies to release the lower the attachment to the body. Here's a book that I don't mention much. It's called the Nefesh Hasitzim. Now, that's a strange word in Aramaic and Hebrew. See, Nefesh means the lower conscious mind. Hasitzim means putting the consciousness, knocking it out and putting it into a physical body. When we're born, the lower conscious mind is actually knocked out from the previous last life, and we form a new one. That's known as the nefesh. And again, I often show these diagrams. I love this diagram because this particular diagram is probably the most accurate in defining who we are in terms of consciousness. And yeah, it's this one right here. I show this a lot. Again, this big thick dashed line here is kind of the division between what modern psychology would call the division between the conscious mind below and the so-called subconscious mind. Well, notice there's that word right there, nefesh. And isn't it interesting, in Vedic and Nadi astrology, they refer to the moon as our emotional perception of reality. And let me tell you, they're right, because that's also you'll anybody who's studied Vedic astrology will have heard of the manas of the mind. They have all these different descriptions of human emotional traits. And of course, notice what it says here, our emotional perception of reality. You talk to people who are very rooted in their reality structures, you're not going to get them out of it. Like if they think, this is the whole game that has been played on the human race forever. And that is, if you believe something with a lot of conviction, even if it's wrong, you're probably going to fight to the death for it. You see what I'm saying? So belief is a very interesting word. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having faith and belief. But on the other hand, we have to be aware that, we often believe things that are not rooted in reality. In fact, look at what's going on in the United States right now. Talk about mind control. Depending on which propaganda machine you're listening to, the so-called left and the so-called right, you're going to believe whatever you're going to believe. So you take what, not to get into politics here, but if you take whichever candidate you listen to the propaganda on, that's the one you're going to believe, you know. And this is really the center of Abramelin is, in the minute you start relying on divinity and your own consciousness and realize that you're a sentient being having a physical experience, right? And this is just a temporary sojourn. You are an avatar in these bodies. And if you realize that, that puts a whole different spin on life. Not that you shouldn't, take care of your responsibilities and your loved ones and all, because you got to. But on the other hand, you look at it with less, maybe emotional attachment that's not based in the reality of what you're really in. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. We're all
Definitely.
sojourners here. And that's why the actions we take do have a lasting effect. They create what we call elementals, thought form elementals around us, and they attach to the auric field. Read the Magus of Strovolos. He spends a ton of time on elemental creation out of the third eye chakra. And that happens by what you believe. And the voltage or the strength of those elementals is your emotions. This is why in sales work, and if you get around religious orders, they create a lot of fervor, a lot of energy, right? It's all emotions. And that's the glue right there. That's what attaches us to this. So it's
Yes.
very important to
Yes.
control what we believe, Not that
Yep.
we should run around like zombies, but on the other hand, we become zombies to the rhetoric that we're fed if we're not aware and sort through the facts.
So true. So true. Let's
It's
take
like a
this.
Pac-Man game, it's all just coming at us. It's like, the Millennium Falcon going through the meteor field, you
Yeah.
got to really watch where you're going.
You gotta
So
watch
it's
where
like
you're
driving a
going.
car, man. It's like driving a car.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's take this last one, Jeff,
Yeah,
from
because I got to
Shane.
go. I got a couple of minutes
Yep.
here and I got to fly.
Yep. This last one from Shane, which I love. What level are the angelic beings singing this reality together? Are there certain times when it's easier to hear them?
Wow, that's deep. That stuff is so deep
Love it.
because there's so many angels. It's way beyond me or anyone's fully ability. But again, I have to quote, where I assembled some of this was from Rabbi Maharil out of the book called The Book of Abramelin. And literally, this diagram here is paralleled from a number of sources, but he talked about the very upper realms. You can see God or divinity is far above creation, and the light actually has to be dimmed down to even get into creation. And souls are believed to be created right here. But if I'm understanding correctly, the seraphims, cherubims, and the thrones, some people call them the orphanums. See, this is the problem. You're going to run into many different reference points. It gets really confusing. But these are believed to be the ones that chant the permutations of creation itself, which is so complex and so vast and so far past our myopic minds to understand. Even quantum physicists, they're not coming close to what's really there, in my opinion. And they said if these guys quit chanting the permutations of creation, and it actually is permutations of God's name, the entire universes would cease to exist in less than a picosecond, which is pretty short, and maybe less than that. But the Yetziratic world is where the molecular constructs of creation are believed to happen. And there's forces way beyond magnetism and frequencies and all this stuff. That's where creation's getting more into the amalgamation of spirit manifesting into matter. So it's a lot deeper. This is a reality machine here. When you look at Earth, Earth is an extremely divine place where spirit manifests in myriads of forms. You look at the diversity of animal and plant life, even human life. Take a look at the diversity in all of us. It's genetically astounding. And science, I remember Francis Crick. I watched the recording of him. He stood up, I think it was 1952 or 53, or somewhere in the 50s. Francis Crick won the Nobel Peace Prize along with Watson. And, all the congressmen, we're going to know everything about everything. We're going to know why you got blue and brown eyes. We're going to know everything, right? And Crick stood up. He said, maybe in 1,000 years, we'll actually figure out what we discovered. But that was an intelligent man. That he was humble because he realized how complex the forces, even behind genomes and genetics, are. It's really deep stuff. And you got spiritual forces unmeasurable in the scientific community. I mean, I don't know much. I got to teach a physics class, which was basic, but I can tell you we do not understand the true forces that are happening. And that's these angels. And they say not only those upper angels, but it's filtered down through these hierarchies of angels, which is pretty amazing. And they actually say the evil spirits are forced. This is why everything is born, it grows, it matures, and it atrophies and it dies because of the good and evil in the physical realms. And it's pretty wild. Way beyond what anybody's going to figure out. I can tell you that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
As I always say, you got to know what you don't know.
You got to know what you
Please be
don't know.
appreciative of that you don't know what you don't know.
Yes. Oh, I am.
Yeah.
I am. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
you got it. You
Yep.
got it.
Yep. Well, I'm going to hold some of these for hopefully our viewers who have asked questions here can join us on Monday. Jeff's got a client coming up here. A lot of people going through so much, Jeff. This planet is tough. It's a tough place. It can be it is a divine place, but it can also be really tough. So I send my love to everyone. Jeff, thank you for this. Thanks everyone for joining us. Take good care of yourselves